Right, let me just very briefly introduce the next speaker, which is my pleasure to do. Hazel Bell has compiled nearly 900 published indexes to books and journals during her career as a professional indexer, and was awarded the Wheatley Medal of the Society of Indexers for an outstanding index in both 2005 and 2006, the first being for the index to Jeremy Wilson's edited version of the 7 Pillars of Wisdom. The complete 1922 Oxford text, she was editor of the Indexer, the Journal of the Indexer, the professional journal of the Society of Indexers from 1978 to 1995, and has written 3 books on indexes and indexing. And today, if I just glance at the program again very quickly to refresh my memory, she will be speaking on indexing and the works of T. Lawrence. So without any further ado, I'll hand it over to Hazel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning. In the summer of 1988, Jeremy Wilson asked the Registrar of the Society of Index to supply him with an indexer for his yet-to-be-completed authorised biography of T. Lawrence. I had been a registered indexer since 1964, specialising in indexing biographies, and I was nominated. On the 18th of July, Heinemann, who were to publish the book, engaged me to compile a 10 to 12-page index to what was planned to be a 600-page book, to be completed in August the following month. Wilson quickly let me know his indexing preferences. He sent me a copy of the index from David Garnett's 900-page volume, Letters of T. Lawrence, writing, "I have always found it very helpful, and it might give you some ideas. I think all mention of names should be included, perhaps under OR, for other references, if it is not everything important. I do not like indexes with a massive entry under Lawrence Thomas Edward, which tries to cover everything in the book." Wilson had undertaken the Lawrence Biography Commission in 1974, embarking on years of religious research. Information lay scattered through countless files of the Public Record Office. Also, thousands of letters, telegrams, official memoranda, and minutes written by Lawrence, and letters and telegrams addressed to him, were preserved in libraries or private collections. By the time the archive had been completed, it formed a sequence of day-to-day records running to about 4 million words, Wilson recorded. After he finally began to construct a narrative from this vast body of information he had acquired, his plan for the composition kept changing, causing delays. Heinemann were anxious for swift publication and asked that, while Jeremy continued to work to complete the manuscript, I should work on the index contemporaneously, something I'd never done before. Jeremy was a setter of the text as well as the author of the book, and sent batches of chapters of the work in progress to me to proofread as well as to index. They did not all arrive in the correct order. Some chapters had to be sent first to the Foreign Office for approval. Others had to be extensively revised as the embargoes on government papers expired. This piecemeal delivery caused me great difficulty in indexing the book. The long intervals between receipt of chapters meant that continuity and concentration were lost. Chapters being received out of order meant that constant revision and insertion to the index were needed. There were also problems of scale, as the index, finally comprising 15,800 words, had to be split into 4 separate files for my BBC Model B computer, which I used with Highview word processing system. All this equally caused problems for Heinemann, as the prospective length of the book and likely date of completion kept changing. I was next told that the book would make 826 pages. Then it was re-estimated at 1,000 pages. On the 6th of October 1988, Jeremy told me that the book was to be published in 2 volumes, the first before Christmas. Then, on the 13th of October, that it would be published in 1 large volume in March 1989. The biography was finally published on the 1st of January 1990, 18 months after I had undertaken the indexing. The book made 1,200 pages. The index ran to 26 pages. In mitigation of Wilson's expressed dislike of a massive entry for the main character, the full-page index entry under Lawrence Thomas Edward was carefully structured. It was divided into 11 paragraphs, each with many subheadings. They were headed Education, Career, Records, Character, Tastes, Rank, Honours and Medals, Personal Crises, Portraits, Relationships, Writings. In 1992, the publisher Mandarin commissioned an abridged paperback edition of the biography, reduced from 1,200 to 454 pages, and the index correspondingly reduced by me from 26 to 20 pages. Then in 2009, another version was contemplated. As Jeremy wrote to me, "Before the World War I centenary begins, the authorised biography really ought to be republished, even if only by print on demand. However, there are things that could do with amendment. Not much, but enough to throw the index." He told me, "I recently bought on eBay an ex-library rebound copy of the biography. I'm going to have the spine taken off with a guillotine, so I can easily scan the text through OCR. I have over half of it in the original origination files, but not the later chapters or the index." So far as I know, no such republication of the biography occurred. Lucy Smith reports having come across things about Wilson's intention to republish in the archive, but doesn't think it ever happened. Throughout the process of producing the biography, together with the index, Jeremy showed a great interest in indexing. After I sent him a copy of the journal, The Indexer, he wrote to me, "Indexing is a profession not altogether divorced from my own. However, I have attempted to use so many bad indexes that I recognise the need for science as well as art in the indexing metier." He even wrote a letter to the indexer about the index of the collection of letters T.E. Lawrence to his biographers Robert Graves and Adele Hart, stating, "This work has an index very aptly described by one of my research assistants as a practical joke. The book is, I admit, an indexer's nightmare. Much of it consists of Lawrence's answers to questions or his comments on draft biographies. As these skim around at random over all periods of Lawrence's life, the indexer can have formed a little idea of the subject matter. If indexers have exams, this would be a perfectly horrid text to test them on." Next, Jeremy turned his attention to the vast amount of Lawrence's correspondence in the archive he had acquired during his research. From this, he edited and produced a series of 10 volumes of Lawrence's exchange of letters with various friends, all of which he asked me to index. By now, I had moved from using the BBC computer to a PC and Word. Jeremy was contemplating producing a cumulative index to all his books on Lawrence, which he intended to install on the website, telestudies.org. In January of 2000, on receiving the proof copy of the first of the letter series, Correspondence with Henry Williamson, for indexing, I asked him, would it be better to omit altogether any entry for Lawrence himself? Jeremy replied, "A thing to bear in mind here is that we will end up with a cumulative index as well. So while a TEL entry might work for a single volume, in the cumulative index it might become so cumbersome that it would be extremely difficult to use." And in February, when I sent him the index to the Williamson letters, he wrote, "Many thanks for the index. It seems sensible for me to convert it straight into typesetting. We need to coordinate on any changes now needed so that I make them in the typeset index and you make them in your version, which you'll need later for the cumulative index." Jeremy regarded the matter of change of individual's rank or title as causing a particular problem in indexing the correspondence volumes. He wrote as to how he dealt with this. "I try to ensure that the footnote references give the titles of people as they were at the time the letter was written. I think the index should do the same. The trouble will come in a few cases where people were ennobled while Lawrence was alive. As an example I can think of is Trenchard, who was knighted. I think that this will probably arise mainly in the cumulative index. What I will do is tell you the dates of such changes, and then you can maybe put in the index something like Trenchard, Hugh, KT 1928. He also wrote, "For the sake of the cumulative index, we will number all the volumes in this series of letters, although there is no way to make the volume numbering chronological." In 2001, I also indexed at Jeremy's request 2 editions of the volume T.E. Lawrence by His Friends, which the T.E. Lawrence Society was reissuing. The first edition had been published by Cape in 1937 with no index. By April 2002, Jeremy's work on the cumulative index was proceeding apace. He wrote to me that month, "I am amusing myself with the combined index. So far, I have combined the indexes of the 2 letter volumes, not too many problems. I'm now starting on the biography. The index on that scans reasonably well, but there are a few differences in treatment. Most notable of these is the presence of a T.E. Lawrence entry in the biography. Could we easily get rid of it for the sake of consistency? Presumably some of the content is duplicated elsewhere, but some would need to be made into new entries. I'll print out the combined index for you, as it may give you ideas about naming sub-entries in future letters volumes. In due course, I hope to combine your TEL Society Journal and the Friends indexes into the online research index. In odd moments, I'm rebuilding all our TEL websites in Dreamweaver rather than Microsoft Front Page. The site will look more up to date, but it's quite a task." The copy of the index that Wilson had read in 1990 contained a hatchet job that I wrote about the index in the 1935 edition of 7 Pillars of Wisdom. As Jeremy had told me, Jonathan Cape had rushed this edition out after Lawrence's sudden death, with the text being indexed as it was set. There was an index to place names and a personal index. They included no subheadings or topics. Headings were attended by many lines of undifferentiated page references. Names were given at their barest. Joyce, entered simply thus, was not a lady of the desert, but should be presented as Joyce, Lieutenant Colonel Pierce Charles. This shockingly inadequate index was repeated, unrevised, in the Penguin edition of 7 Pillars of Wisdom, which was first published in 1962 and then reprinted almost annually. Jeremy told me that Lawrence originally intended to index this edition himself, and he gave further indication of his own interest in indexing in calling this plan of Lawrence's a task of a kind that I suspect he would have found excruciatingly tedious. He was by nature inconsistent in his writing, for example in spellings. He lacked the disciplined approach that an index demands. Lawrence abandoned this idea, perhaps because he realized how long it would take him, Jeremy suggested. Instead, Lawrence decided to make do with a revised version of the chapter-by-chapter synopses he had prepared in the original manuscript. He provided these at the beginning of the 1926 edition of 7 Pillars of Wisdom, giving each page its own content summary in small capitals above the text, such as immorality of battle, strangeness and pain, Arabia proper, the problem of population, nomadism in action, tides of wandering. Thus, as I commented in my article, barely basic indexes at the back of the book contrast with detailed subject analysis of the text found atop each page. What subject headings and subheadings are here, had they but been assembled and properly arranged in the index? Through the succeeding years, Jeremy often referred to his intention to challenge me to provide a proper index of 7 Pillars when he should produce the volume himself. In 2003, that time and that challenge came. It was indeed a challenge. Lawrence originally wrote 7 Pillars in 1919, then rewrote it after the first draft was lost, and had this full version published in 8 copies, typeset by the Oxford Times in 1922. In 1926, he abridged this text, shortening it by 25%, to produce a deluxe subscription edition. This abridgment was the version used for the 1935 Cape edition. It comprised 250,600 words. The complete Oxford text had 334,600 words, and it presented many other problems for indexing besides such length. In a letter to Charlotte Shaw, Lawrence described Seven Pillars in these terms. It's more a storehouse than a book, has no unity, is too discursive, dispersed, heterogeneous. I've shot into it as a builder into his yard, all the odds and ends of ideas which came to me during those years. And E.M. Forster, in his review of the 1935 edition, emphasised the widely varying subject matter. He outlined the course of the Arab Revolt and commented, "Round this tent pole of a military chronicle, T.E. has hung an unexampled fabric of portraits, descriptions, philosophies, emotions, adventures, dreams. He has also contributed to sociology in recording what is probably the last of the picturesque wars: camels, pennants, the blowing up of little railway trains." So there were many types of index entry to be added to the names-only version of 1935, a miscellany of topics deriving from military theory and history, with the movements and components of the various national forces, the course of the Arab Revolt, international politics, geology, Eastern travels, Bedouin life and tribes, and Lawrence's personal agonies of the soul, as well as his daily life in Arabia. Wilson thought another reason for Lawrence's abandoning his plan to index the book was that he realised how much information the text lacks: full names, ranks, places, dates. By assiduous research in the archives of World War I, Wilson discovered and supplied much of it, new, valuable information regarding the course of the Arab Revolt. The full-page introductory note that Jeremy provided for the index begins, "In Seven Pillars, Lawrence frequently provides a surname only. He also claims to have disguised identities, particularly of minor characters. Despite this, comparison with contemporary documents shows that a large number of the names are real. In many instances, it has been possible to add further information here, such as initials or forenames, as well as rank and regiment. As for the Arabic names, so many, so variously presented, so lacking in distinguishing detail, Jeremy consulted a retired diplomat, striving to correct and standardize spelling, while I provided what glosses I might to distinguish Abdullah from Abdullah, Ali from Ali. Lawrence proved himself no indexer's friend in the matter of consistency. He wrote in his preface to the 1935 text, "Arabic names won't go into English exactly. There are some scientific systems of transliteration. I spell my names anyhow to show what rot the systems are." Well, thank you, Colonel Lawrence. Recording the conclusion to my article on the Cape edition of Seven Pillars, where I observed what perfect subject headings and subheadings for an index, the terms that Lawrence had himself devised as his page headings, would make, I availed myself of them, incorporating some as main headings or subheadings in my new index. I was delighted to be able to do this, the opportunity for a unique embellishment for the index of a unique text with a unique publishing history. So, for instance, I gave the entry of the Hejaz Armoured Car Company these subheadings of Lawrence's: motoring joyfulness, touring about, lust of speed. I wouldn't advise them myself. And when Lawrence's camel, Wad Heha, bears him on an amazing journey across frozen snow and over a ridge after a deep fall, Lawrence supplied the page heading, "A Camel's Glory." The entry for camels is in fact the longest in the index. Under the subheading for Wad Heha, I included glory as an unexpected sub-subheading. It was essential to make it clear that these terms of Lawrence's reproduced in the index were of the author's own devising. The introductory note to my index included entries printed in small capitals are those given by Lawrence as chapter headings or running titles in the 1926 subscribers edition of Seven Pillars of Wisdom. Not all Lawrence's chapter or page headings could be used. Some are ironical or could be understood only in actual conjunction with the relevant text. For instance, King Hussein takes great pride in his captured Turkish brass band. He telephones a party of British officers visiting his son Abdullah in Jeddah and has the band play while, I quote, The officers, called solemnly one by one to the telephone, heard the band in the Palace of Mecca 45 minutes away. Stores expressed the general gratification, and the Sharif replied that the band should be sent down by forced march to Jeddah to play in our courtyard also. Lawrence's page heading here is Diplomatic Amenities. In another instance, a camel unfortunately dies of mange, after Lawrence points out its condition to its Arab owner, who waxes eloquent about the wonderful veterinary service they will establish after taking Damascus, but fails to treat his sick animal. Lawrence gave the heading to that page, Spanish Castles. Very clever, but also, alas, unusable in the index. I substituted veterinary service envisaged. Among all the major serious topics in the book, there are fascinating details of daily life in the Hijaz. It seems extraordinary that for 80 years after the book was written, these matters were inaccessible by index, buried in the massive text. Some topical entries are books, coffee preparation, dress, and food, which includes the subheadings medically condemned, carried in desert, shot in desert, camels killed for, eating manners. Lawrence himself was the reporter and narrator of this history, but it was not an autobiography, and I was spared making a full index entry for him. However, there were passages of soul-searching and introspection that could go under no other heading but his name. Indeed, Private Troubles was the running head he provided for 3 pages of the book, and Myself for another 8. There were also references to his written works and photographs of him. I gave him a minimalist index entry with only these subheadings: Private Troubles, in small caps to show that it's Lawrence's own term, 30th birthday, self-analysis, private motives and ambition, diary and notebooks, 7 pillars of wisdom, and 4 photographs. Jeremy was much involved in the indexing throughout. As well as ensuring the correct form of the Arabic names and supplying missing information, he answered all my queries meticulously and inserted an explanatory paragraph in the index about the 3 indistinguishable Turks called Jamal. Meanwhile, he was also concerned about the inclusion of this index in his proposed online cumulative index, which he called the Union Index. Now he gave more careful consideration to its formatting. In August 2003, he wrote, "The biography index is not online yet. One reason is that I'm toying with the idea of putting all the indexes in a database. True, the result wouldn't be a fully integrated index. You would get a page showing a separate result for each publication that contains a search word. But in other words, it would be less cumbersome. My worry is that the final index may simply be unusable because of the length of entries on individual topics." And in October, he wrote about the index of 7 pillars, "I think that the present scatter of dates for individuals looks culpably inconsistent, especially on the Arab side. A great deal of research will be needed to include even all the important people. Therefore, I think we should drop the personal dates from this version of the index. We don't have time to bring that info up to a respectable level of consistency. However, I have decided to add biographical info to the online version of the combined indexes. In the long run, the online version of the index is going to be important, so that's a good place to add this info wherever we have it." And in November, he sent several further messages about the prospective accumulation. "I'm thinking about ways to make the online index a project I can do without it taking half a lifetime. One solution, if I knew the programming, would be to put the entries in an online database. I think that's the solution we shall go to eventually. When I have some spare cash, I'll get the programming and initial data entry done in India. For the moment, however, I'll keep to flat pages built in HTML. I think what I'll do is to present major headings for which there are lots of entries in different books in 3 sections: Lawrence's works, letters, and biography. Within each section, I'll aim to combine the entries, but not for the moment between them. I'll find a way to flag the headings presented in this way. And I am intrigued to see how the online version will shape up when I've added Lawrence Shaw 1927 and Seven Pillars, my first priority, and then the rest of the biography. In 2005, Jeremy proposed to the T.E. Lawrence Society that their journal should be indexed by me. First, I should create a cumulative index to the 10 issues that had been published, which would be printed. Then I should add each successive journal to the index as they appeared, and Jeremy would post the cumulative journal index on the Society's website. Then, he told me, the next step will be to add the journal to the Union online index I'm working on. He asked, with regard to the Union index, do you have your index to T.E. Lawrence by his friends on disk? I have all your Castle Hill Press indexes, except the biography, which I need to scan. Again, there were many technical problems in combining the various indexes to go online, formatting problems in combinations and inserts, especially as the first one I had done for him was on a BBC Model B. It all had to be changed to conform to the later indexes delivered in Word. In December 2005, Jeremy wrote, my concern is that we need to be able to transfer the TEL Society Journal's index easily into MS front page. I think MSFP will accept bold from either MS Word or RTF. If you'd like to send me a sample, I'll try transferring it to FP and see what happens. And in January 2006, if we wanted to combine the TEL Society indexes with the Castle Hill Press indexes, which is my long-term hope, though I'm going one step at a time, we would need all the indexes set in the same style. And 3 years later, in August 2009, we'll probably have one web page for each letter of the alphabet, since otherwise the index would make an extremely long web page, and we'd have to program in section anchors each time it was updated. Now, I should proceed to our triumphant conclusion, describing the Union Index on the web in all its glory. Alas, it no longer appears anywhere in full, and there is no hard evidence of it ever having done so. The strongest evidence I know of is a message I sent to a colleague in the Society of Indexers in August 2006. I wrote, you may like to know of this mammoth union of indexes that Jeremy Wilson has compiled by amalgamating all of mine to Lawrence's works, his works of Lawrence. And I gave the URL to access it. Later, I reported, Jeremy's index is still there, added to as I index further Lawrence volumes for him. It seems a fantastic achievement to me. I didn't do it, he did, combined them all. Lucy Smith reports that the T.E. Lawrence Studies website ran until early in 2022, when it was taken down by the owner. But Magdalen archives were able to make a digital copy of it before then and have all the information safely stored. The index was not on their archived copy of the website, but she also looked in Wilson's digital files, which contain many old web pages which were not on the live site when it was taken down. She did find a complete index with files from A to Z dating from January 2003 in an HTML format. It would make me very happy indeed if any of you were to tell me you recall having seen this Union Index online in its heyday.